the newsagents.
Any briefings like that, I think, are disgraceful, and I don't accept that briefings like that should happen. I don't see any reason why Diane Abbott can't stand as a Labour MP going forward.
I don't know whether we can yet call it Abbott-gate, but the story about Diane Abbott and whether she will stand again in Hackney North and Stoke Newington is now in day 3 or day 4. It is the first running story of this campaign. Yes, Tory mishaps aplenty, but this is a running sore now for the Labour Party and what on earth they're going to do.
And Keir Starmer hasn't chosen to resile from this. He's poured petrol on the internecine battles which have so marked and characterised the Labour Party in recent years, because overnight it has become clear that Labour High Command are deselecting a string of left-wing Labour candidates or sitting MPs. Why? Why is Keir Starmer and his leadership team doing this now? On today's show, we're going to try and explain. Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's Jon.
It's Lewis.
And we promised you that today would be your questions answered. And we lied. No, we're actually bringing them
fluid events.
Because this is such a big story. We thought we have to do what is happening in the Labour Party. So that is going to be today. Tomorrow we will do your questions. Promise, sort of. And also later in the show, we're going to hear from the playwright, brilliant playwright, Jez Butterworth, who created Jerusalem and who has a lot to say about politics and the world we're in right now.
But as we're recording, the Diane Abbott story is continuing to gather momentum. And as I said just now as well, there is this extra dimension of the deselections of a couple of Labour MPs or candidates who are on the left of the party. They are connected stories, but they are separate stories as well.
Exactly.
So perhaps let's just start with Diane Abbott. So we heard from Angela Rayner at the top of the show there, basically saying, wading into this row, saying that she sees, the way she sees it, she doesn't think that if Abbott wants to stand, why she shouldn't be allowed to stand. And the reason, of course, as we've been saying all week, this matters, is because it is throwing the Labour campaign messaging right off. Day after day, people are talking about Diane Abbott. The Diane Abbott story led the BBC 6 o'clock news, the Sky 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock news last night, ITV I think as well. All of the big bulletins, LBC Radio, everything. Hour after hour talking about this story. There was a rally in her constituency last night with people urging her to stand again, and it is destabilising the Labour campaign. And so Rayner is now stepping in, and that some people have written this up as a split. Telegraph saying this is an internal Labour split. It might appear that way, but I think behind the scenes it is highly unlikely that Rayner will not be acting in concert with the Starmer leadership at this point to try and cauterise the wound of this story.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I've been told. I've been speaking to Labour people this morning. And as I understand it, far from Angela Rayner freelancing and going out and saying something that contradicts where Keir Starmer is, that actually Angela Rayner has been one of those people who's been putting her arms round Diane Abbott. And there has been a lot of concern over Diane Abbott. I mean, I think there are people worried about her health. I think there are also other concerns that people did want. There was a deal done, that there would be a dignified exit for Diane Abbott, and that a lot of people had been working with her so that she would say, right, you've had the whip restored, but I'm choosing now not to stand. And I think people were caught by surprise when Diane Abbott suddenly announces that she is going to run. But that follows a briefing given to the Times newspaper, presumably from somebody in Keir Starmer's office. And I have spoken to people today who say that person should be marched out of the office and onto the street and never to return again. That person should be fired because it was so bloody stupid and crass that you have negotiated this thing with Diane Abbott and then you blow it up with some idiotic briefing.
And there is no doubt that there are some people in Starmer's office or in the sort of immediate kind of surroundings of it who have sometimes have been a bit, and you hear this frustration expressed internally as well, just a bit high on their own supply. That they get addicted. And this happens to political parties sometimes, and operatives within political parties. They get addicted to briefing. They think it makes them look macho. They makes them think it sort of proves their political virility in some way. But what has happened here, it shows the dangers of that because it destabilises an entirely clearly worked through operation which had been worked on for some time. So that's where we are with the Abbott story, which is important in its own right. But I think actually of even more importance, because I think it tells us far more about where the Labour Party is going in the next Parliament, assuming they're the government, is this purge of the left, as it's being called, which is we've had several candidates, and including one sitting MP. So we've got one candidate in Chingford, Faiza Shaheen, who has been on the left of the party. She was one of the only left-wingers really to get reselected in this round. She fought the seat in 2019 against Ian Duncan-Smith, very marginal majority. Young woman of colour. She found out yesterday, on Wednesday, despite the fact that she's been nursing that seat for a very long time now, campaigning week in, week out, she just had a baby, finds out that she is not going to be allowed, or she thinks she's not going to be allowed to stand again. And this relates to some tweets that she liked, which the party are saying have anti-Semitic tropes, and therefore she can't be allowed. This follows also another basic deselection of a left-wing Labour MP, Lloyd Russell Moyle, in Brighton Kemp Town. He's claiming that a vexatious complaint has been brought against him, which is giving the party grounds to remove him as an MP. And that itself follows several other deselections over the past few years of sitting MPs, of left-wing MPs, which the central Labour Party has orchestrated.
Well, so this purge was happening last night. An hour after Faiza Shaheen was told that she wouldn't be fighting the seat, she was on Newsnight, which was a hugely controversial thing to do because, you know, you don't want to rock the boat during an election. Well, she did.
You got an email tonight. When?
Just like an hour ago.
Saying...
So basically, suddenly I'm at I'm out campaigning and my phone's blowing up. They've briefed the press. They briefed the press before they even had the decency to call me and talk to me. There was a meeting yesterday. My baby cried through half of it, so I don't know how they came to a decision because I couldn't even hear their questions. 14 tweets since 2014, 10 years. 3 of those were like about the Green Party, me liking my friend tweet before I joined the Labour Party. And one of them was about my experiences of Islamophobia in the party. Like, how am I not allowed to talk about my experiences of Islamophobia and the double standards that I've seen and that we see with Diane Abbott, for instance? I honestly, I'm just so shocked right now to be treated this badly after being such an active member of the party. And, we were one of the tiny number, 6 Tory-held seats in 2019 that had a swing to Labour. To act like I am some kind of person that can't, that isn't good at elections, that frustrates the Labour's purpose.
So one of the tweets that she had liked did contain a very anti-Semitic trope about the Israel lobby and the power and all the professional people who come at you immediately. And she was saying, look, I like that. Apparently she thinks in the middle of the night or something like that. So she is of the left of the party. And you can see how somebody like that could be in the crosshairs. But if you are trying to have this purge, why don't you get all this stuff out of the way? We keep on hearing Labour people saying we just want to get all our problems sorted out, get rid of the bad policy now, so that when we're in an election we can just concentrate on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 things here, isn't there? There's the kind of the ethics of it, and Faiza Shaheen referring to it there. I think a lot of people have sympathy in the sense that it's not much of a way to treat anyone. I mean, it'd be one thing if, as you say, John, it had happened a year ago or something like that. But to learn on the eve of the general election, or during the general election campaign, that you're no longer going to be this, you thought this was going to be your future. She had every reason to believe. There's no reason to believe she wouldn't have won that seat, given where the polling is. That's where you think your future is. That's where you think your job is. And then suddenly you find that's not the case anymore. Lloyd Russell Moyle, another person who, again, whatever you think about him, there are a lot of people who think he's a very eccentric figure, and certainly the Central Party didn't like him. He was an MP, had a very safe seat. That was going to be his job. Now he's out of a job. So there's the ethics of how it's being treated, and we've already talked this week on the show about the kind of accusations of complete inconsistency when you have people who are close to Starmer who have used racist language or ended up using racist tropes or whatever it is, things that are often far more severe, mysteriously enough just being allowed to stand there, not even being in investigation. So there's the ethics of it, and then there's the question, which is perhaps we haven't talked about as much this week, is why are they doing it now? And I think it is a really revealing of the psychology. And I think there are a few reasons. One is, I think that it speaks to the idea that perhaps they think that the majority, when it comes, might not be as big as everyone assumes, or at least they're taking precautions just in case it's not. Why? Because if it's not, then suddenly the PLP, the left wing of the PLP, which is a bit bigger than it used to be, or it has been in this parliament, suddenly becomes very powerful. These people become very powerful, and they can extract concessions, much in the same way that the Conservative right has done. And so they're neutralising that before it even happens.
So what's so interesting about that is that I have been speaking to a couple of people this morning who were at the heart of the Blair operation. And one of them said to me, look, the thing you want to do is you do this now. You have power over them. Take them out before they have power over you, which is exactly speaking to your point. There was another bit about the psychology as well, which I thought was fascinating, where someone said to me, look, when Tony Blair was running for Prime Minister in 97, there were the political secretaries, the people who liaised with the trade unions, the people who knew how the party worked, were saying, you've got to get rid of people like Corbyn. You don't want him standing to be an MP for the Labour Party. No, Blair didn't do it because he thought these people are irrelevant. They will make no difference. Now, spool forward 30 years, we have seen Jeremy Corbyn become the leader of the Labour Party and lead Labour to its worst defeat since 1935. Now, some of those people that were there in the Blair office then are around the Keir Starmer office now, and they think there is an element of unfinished business, that it was a mistake of Blair, even though it didn't matter because Blair had such a huge majority and therefore he could not be held to ransom by far-left MPs. But it was unfinished business that this election might be a lot tighter. We need to do what we didn't do in 97 and move against these left-wing MPs. And that is why you feel there is something of a purge going on.
That's exactly right. I think that the thing that no one is talking about is everything that's happened since 2015. The people who are around Starmer, not just some of them are veterans of the Blair period, many of them are veterans of the internecine battles of the Corbyn period itself. These are the people who stayed with the party, stuck with the party, who fought in the trenches, as they see it, against the left. And they think they won. And this is their reward. This is their desert. And that they think that they are that their battle is about ensuring that the left of the Labour Party can never return. They actually think, and if you talk to people on the left right now, some of them, they're furious about this. Some of them will say, I wish we'd bloody done this. This is exactly what Corbyn and McDonnell should have done, that they resisted as a result of pressure in the media and so on. But we should have absolutely done this. We should have deselected all of these people and we would still be in the party now. That is the psychology. That is the psychology of the people around Starmer. And the people around Starmer, and this is the one thing that the Labour left and the Labour right, this is the one thing they have in common, because you might be sat there thinking, why would they do this now in a general election campaign? They do it because everybody in the Labour Party, more so than the Conservative Party, they are so factional. The one thing they love more than anything else is to beat the other side of the Labour Party within. And that is what this is about.
The thing that used to drive Tony Blair absolutely frigging berserk when he became a Labour MP and was kind of rising up the ranks of the Labour Party was Labour's addiction to infighting, to factional infighting, where you'd get to a general election, Labour would lose, and you'd see MPs literally thinking, oh, phew, thank God for that. We can sort about our slate for the NEC or our slate for this or what motions we're going to rally behind at Labour Party conference. As if the battle is internal. It's not about winning power. And that was something that Blair tried to change the psychology of the Labour Party, that, you know, there is no prize for coming second in politics. But it seems that an awful lot of Labour MPs and Labour activists are in their comfort zone when they are fighting each other rather than fighting the Conservatives. And you think that is crazy. But the idea that this should be happening now, when we are, we're 5 weeks away now from the general election, this is nuts.
I suppose they are making a bet that in this early stages of the campaign, the lead is large enough and that it is worth the attrition of getting the party right as they see it. And this is the obsession of both the Labour left and the Labour right, the obsession with making sure the party internally, as we're saying, is where it needs to be. But of course, this is going on in another direction as well, right? Because it's not just the deselection of certain left-wing Labour MPs, and I'm told I think there's potentially more to come on that. But it is also the imposition of Starmer's people So something that you may not have noticed is that overnight, and again there will be more in the coming days, there have been a series of announcements that the Labour Party has made. They say it's selections, but it's not selections really. All of these Labour MPs who have mysteriously stood down, as we were talking earlier in the week, in safe Labour seats, probably off on their way to the House of Lords, are now being replaced by Starmer's key lieutenants, many of whom sit on the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party and are Starmer's people on the National Executive Committee. People that you probably have never heard of, someone like, for example, Luke Akehurst. Not a very well-known figure, but he's a very, very big figure within the Labour Party. Josh Simon, who is the director of Starmer's own think tank, effectively, Labour Together. These are people who, as I say, see themselves as having been in the trenches of seeing on the left, of making the Starmer project a success, and they are going to be big players in a Labour government if it happens in the next PLP. So all of this really, if you think about the long durée of the Starmer project since 2020, which has basically gone from saying that he will be a unity candidate, saying that he will bring together left and right, all the way through to basically really the cleansing of the left, basically putting them in, as Peter Mandelson famously said, a sealed tomb. This is the kind of end point of that process, what's happened in the last 24 hours and what will happen in the next 72.
I mean, part of this always happens at every general election, that the leader's office will have... There will be key people that they will want to find safe seats for. They will know that certain people are going to retire just before the election is called, and then you parachute in the person of your favoured candidate. That has always happened. It's the purge element of it. It's the other side of the balance sheet that is rarer and so obvious. And yet, that is what has happened.
Although those seats, presumably, again, will now have imposed, so in Chingford and in Brighton and wherever else they happen to do it, they'll impose some of their own people, whatever the local party think.
Yeah, completely. And it's, as you say, look, we've still got 5 weeks to go. Maybe Labour are calculating we'll have moved on from this. But it has been the one running story of this campaign. When, last week, when we got the announcement that there was going to be a general election, did I envisage that a week on we would be talking about internal Labour Party battles? Given the discipline that we have seen hitherto, I would have thought not.
But as we're saying, right, that's the thing. And again, I can totally understand people's incredulity. But for all of these people, as weird as it might seem, that is the battle.
Yeah,
that
completely.
is the battle, and that's it. I mean, it is worth just bearing in mind. I mean, the Labour left, I can understand they get angry about this, but it is worth just bearing in mind the journey that Keir Starmer has been on, or at least he appears to have been on. This is Keir Starmer talking about the importance of unity in the Labour Party, particularly around selections and so on, in 2020.
One of the most important things is unifying the party. We've been taking lumps out of each other. We're too divisive. And if we don't change that, we won't win the next general election. So we have to unite. That doesn't mean everybody agreeing, because you're never going to get that in the Labour Party, but it does mean creating an environment which people can respectfully disagree and come together and make a decision and move forward.
Well, if you look at what Boris Johnson did, and I'm not advocating it, he just took the whip away from 25 Tories and had done with it. Now, I'm guessing from your facial expression, you wouldn't go that far.
I don't think...
What would you do?
If you're going to go for unity, you've got to inspire people to come together. You can't force them to come together. And disciplining people to be united is going nowhere. So the only way in the end to unite the Labour Party is to be very clear that's what you want to do, to recognise there will be different views and to reconcile them, and to have a culture and a spirit where people genuinely want to pull together. I think that is possible.
Possible.
4 years is a long time in politics. Jesus.
I mean, I heard you quoting the famous Ben quote this morning that you need in the Labour Party you need a left wing
and a right wing
and a right wing to be able to fly, which I always thought showed what a great communicator Tony Benn was, but maybe not the best politician. In the sense that we're a broad church, but it's led to these factional fights which have kept Labour out of power for most of the late 20th century, and which has condemned Labour to being in opposition for the last 14.
Well, that's the other thing about why this keeps happening, right? Is because fundamentally Starmer's people and the people who love this factional stuff, who love to beat the left, they think it's worked out pretty well for them. They've gone from a party which was near death to one that's on the verge of potentially a landslide victory. Now, whether you attribute that to beating the left or not is an open debate, but that's certainly part of the reason of how they would internalise it. Question is, of course, when you get addicted to that stuff, sometimes the revolution eats its children, right? There is an element of sometimes when you've slain all your enemies, what else do you do? And when you get addicted to that sort of bloodletting, and I think there are Labour MPs in the PLP who are not on the left who are worried about the kind of control that maybe this adverts to in terms of how Starmer number 10 might exercise control within the Labour Party. And maybe, when people used to talk about Blair having an iron grip and everything, I mean, I was talking to an ex-Labour MP about this not long ago. They were like, honestly, what we see in terms of selections from this party, from Starmer, and what we see in terms of how they sort of exercise control in the party, it makes Blair look like Bambi, as he used to be called. It makes it, it was nothing like this. This is taking things, that sort of discipline, to another level.
Look, if Keir Starmer wins the election on July the 4th with a huge majority, this will all seem very inconsequential. If Labour win the election with a very small majority, then maybe he will be thinking, I'm glad we had this fight.
It's even more consequential.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are joined in the studio by one of the greats of the London theatre, Jez Butterworth, whose play The Hills of California is running for another 3 weeks in London. Maitlis, you've seen it?
We saw it on the same night.
Yeah, absolutely, we saw it on the same night. The singing was sensational. The storyline was really interesting. You didn't expect it. Jez, welcome to the studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for being with us. And
it's great
you've
to be
written
here.
so much more, and we'll talk about some of the other things as well. Actually, just before the microphones went live, you were talking about the terror of opening night. And I kind of think, not Jez Butterworth. You've done so many of them and you have so many kind of...
We know it's going to be fine. Why are you worried?
What are you got to worry about?
It surprises me every time, but I think that's one of the reasons why I love it. I love coming back to it, is that it's just the same as it was 35 years ago when I was at college, when I was at university. You'd be just as thrilled, just as excited. It's the same feeling. And you think, why the hell am I doing this? That hasn't gone anywhere. That's never changed. If anything, it's getting worse.
One of the things you do, Jez, with your sets is you bring people into what feels like a really warm environment. It's the sort of the kitchen set. It's the noise. It's the kids. It feels very sort of a sort of warm embrace, and then you suddenly go dark on us. And I'm wondering, in a funny way, what you do is the same that you do to politics. You let people think that they're not watching a play about something absolutely pivotal until you suddenly realise you are.
Yeah, I think that is part of my technique. It's unconscious, but now that I'm aware of how to do it, it's a bit more conscious than it has been. I think the first acts of my plays are like congregational. You're all in there together and you're part of a crowd. And it sort of slowly narrows in and in and in until it's just sort of talking to just one person. I remember I once filmed the audience watching Jerusalem, and they're all together and looking round in the first act. And at the end, they're even like letting go of the person's hand that they're sitting next to, and they're just experiencing it on their own. So there's this kind of sort of like, what's it called, irising in on the individual in it that I think is dramatic.
But there's no shortage of politics in theatre where different playwrights are trying to do politics in their own way. I kind of sometimes feel when I go and see an overtly political play, inverted commas, I slightly worry that I'm going to be hit over the head with a hammer and that the subtlety is not going to be there. And I just wonder whether you think that you've got to do it in a subtle way so that people kind of don't think they're being preached to or lectured or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think it's part of my nature that I don't really... One of the things fascinating about coming along here today is that I don't really follow the news or what's going on, because I find it leads me off track. I set most of my stuff in the 20th century. I'm still interested in the things I was interested in 30 years ago, and they don't seem to be changing. And the fact that they're not changing seems to suggest that they're eternal. And so I'm focusing on those, and everything else is dressing. I was as surprised as anyone that Jerusalem was considered to be like, summing up its time.
They called it the Brexit play. I mean, the Mail loved it.
Yeah, and all I knew about Brexit was I didn't like the sound of it at all.
But
I'm
it
not
ended up
capable of
just
writing
being
them.
quite political for you, that whole event, because you were offered an OBE, right?
Yeah.
By David Cameron.
Yeah.
And you turned it down.
I did, and that was just such a gift, wasn't it? I could look really cool suddenly. by it was so much more fun to turn it down than it would have been to accept. But I wouldn't accept something like that because I know which side of the equation I want to stand. I mean, one of the things that happened just around that time was your interview with Andrew, which talk about great drama. I mean, I honestly, and with my hand on my heart, think that nobody has filmed anything as important or funny as that in the 21st century. I think the most important, Martin Scorsese said, the most important film of the 20th century was the Zapruder footage of the Kennedy assassination. And I didn't think that you could take the Kennedy assassination and cross it with The Office and end up with something that was just, I think in 400 years' time, Andrew's contribution to human experience is so much bigger than anyone else in his family could ever achieve. He's part of a comedy double act there that will endure for centuries. People will watch that. I watch it about once a month, which means I've seen it about 100 times.
I'm really worried this interview is going off the rails now.
It's true. It's true.
If I hear any more of Jez Butterworth praising Emily Maitlis, it's going to be really upsetting
I'm
for
going
me.
to take you back, just to help John's sanity, I'm going to take you back to where we left the question, which was about David Cameron offering you an award for drama and you saying, no, I can't take it from David Cameron. Why?
Because of Brexit, because I felt like what we were doing there just seemed like a really, really stupid, parochial, nasty idea, and I still think so. And I knew where it was coming from, or I had an inkling about who was responsible for me being put up for it, and I just didn't want to play along with it. And I've not really regretted it. I don't really know what it is. I want to be able to walk around feeling like I'm not part of that. It seems important to me. They used to bury actors outside the graveyard walls. I like being beyond the pale.
Jez, let me go back to something you also just said about that you'll still kind of feel, I don't know, intellectually, emotionally, whatever, living in the 20th century, and that's the where your preoccupations are. I'm not going to go into sort of spoilers about Hills of California, but there is a very strong Me Too element that you suddenly don't quite see coming initially, but it becomes a very important part of the narrative structure and the storyline of it, which feels very 21st century.
Well, look, baked into the idea of Me Too, if you look at it, in its essence, is that this has been going on everywhere forever. It wasn't at the moment that it was. To build that moment, you needed decades of abuse, and it needed to be absolutely pervasive. And so I would use that as an example of something where I've chosen a subject which is timeless, that's taken to be contemporaneously appropriate, but I haven't done that on purpose. It's just it's not designed to say, oh look, and this is about me too. That kind of thing's been going on in the show business and every business forever.
But you had a direct experience with Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Talk us through that.
Well, I mean, I only made 2 films, and the second one was for Harvey, and it was 25 years ago now. And it was a horrible experience in almost every way. And I was unaware at the time, but I was sent off to Los Angeles to interview and audition a bunch of other actresses who, we went to the Peninsula Hotel, and we were in a suite at the Peninsula Hotel at the top there. And the people that were coming through the door were all the people who were the first vanguard of the people that outed him 20 years later. So whether I was sent into that room as some kind of peace offering or threat, I don't know, but it's one of the most sort of sinister.
Wait, just talk us through. So the women that were coming through the door were the first. I mean, the first victims. As we were you? I mean, what was your? Did you know what they were going through? No. Or
no. I mean, I didn't have any idea. I was sent along there. I was 28, 29. years old, and I was in Los Angeles for the very first time, meeting actors who I thought were, could be great collaborators on this adventure we were going on. I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. But the guy from Miramax, he knew.
What do you say he knew?
What we were doing. Well, he knew what he was talking to them all before they came in the
Of
room.
what was expected, or
I don't know what that conversation was. I'd have to be guessing it, but I know that I was talking to some people. Something was up. Something was up. Something was really up. You could just tell. And I was like, "What is wrong?"
And when you were directly kind of working with Weinstein, what was your experience of him?
Pretty much what you'd imagine. I mean, he's a phenomenally intelligent, phenomenally manipulative, dangerously volatile child.
And did you ever confront him?
Yeah, not about that. He physically attacked a producer who I was working with on the movie in the street, and I hit him back.
literally?
Yeah,
So you thumped Weinstein.
I did. Yeah.
And when you said the other word you used was he was phenomenally manipulative.
Yeah.
How did that manifest itself?
You could go in thinking you'd got your hat on straight, you got your story straight, what it was you wanted, and within 30 seconds you didn't know which way was up.
So I remember about when the Me Too movement sort of gathered pace, you came into Newsnight, I was there, and you read out a letter that was to Weinstein. I'm just wondering what that felt like, because you'd had this direct experience, but 25 years ago as a very young man, and then suddenly this is all coming out of the water, right?
Yeah. One of my very best friends and oldest friends is James Harding, who runs Tortoise, the former editor of the Times, and I think
Former head of BBC News.
Former head of BBC News. And when it all came out, I got in touch with James and I said, who should I send this letter to? And I think it was 25 minutes later, I'm doing an interview. Yeah. It was that thought
That's
through.
how news works, Jez.
It was that thought through. I mean, I was living in Mortimer Street at the time. You were just around the corner. So there I was on the news that night, and it was one of the most ill thought through things I've ever got involved in. I don't regret what I said. I regret the fact that I thought I should be saying something about this subject. I felt like afterwards that it wasn't.
Why? Because I remember at the time, I'm going to be very honest, I called up a lot of men who'd been in the world of film, and they all had that same response, which is, it's not for me. Well, and actually, I think it was for anyone who had worked with Weinstein. It was hard enough for the women to come forward, and we did. I remember speaking to Emma Thompson at length, but I think it was for anyone.
Well, that's really good to know. I mean, I don't do Twitter or I don't really understand what all social media is or anything, but I do know that a lot of people, after I appeared on that, got on and said, what the fuck do you think he knows about this subject?
Okay, you really don't use Twitter enough, do you?
No, I don't. I've literally that was the last.
That was the last time every day. What the do you know about anything is the basic starting point. That's the most civil end of the conversation.
That was the first and last time I looked at it.
So you've seen presumably the news about Harvey Weinstein's retrial now on one of the convictions being overturned. Your sense of that?
It just seems like a damn shame, and I just hope that the other one sticks. So that
West Coast.
I mean, it must be just so awful for the people involved to discover, that the process wasn't due, that it that it didn't work out for them. But I just hope he remains behind bars.
And Jez, do you think that just on the wider sense of the Me Too movement, that as a result of the kind of the very public kind of bringing out of all of this, the attitudes have changed, that behaviour has changed on sets or in plays or in films or whatever? The power dynamic has shifted.
It's hard for me to say because I'm a playwright, and I'm a playwright who doesn't go to see his own plays that often. I think I've seen Hills of California twice. Loved it both times.
Well, that's
Did it
good.
get better?
It was better the second time.
Did you go, God, I'm good?
But yeah, well done. You still got it.
What was that a response to Weinstein? Was that you trying to get the Weinstein thing?
No, not really. No, certainly not consciously. I mean, I don't sit down and go, right, I'll. You know, it was 25 years later. I tend to wait about that long before I let loose on an idea. But I don't think it was consciously that. I wanted to write something that was set before and after rock and roll, first of all, that was set immediately before and immediately after. And for a mother to have such hopes and dreams for her family, and then...
Because it's about women's power, or lack of power, really,
yeah,
isn't it?
it is. And then I just had that device that I wanted the same actress to play the mother who played the daughter who was damaged. And once I had that, I knew I had a play. I would never sit there and go, right, I'm gonna stuff it up Harvey now, because I can think of much more accurate ways to do that. But
Like punch him.
But yes, precisely.
Can we talk about something that's really contemporary at the moment, which I guess pulls in this idea of writing about things you know, or writing about characters you know, and that's the whole controversy around Baby Reindeer, which is the Netflix, hit, right? It's been a massive hit in sort of across the world. And yet there are these questions about Richard Gadd's own experience and whether he should have said it was based on rather than it was a true story. And we've now heard from Fiona Harvey, who is the person that he accuses essentially of being his stalker. And I'm wondering where you stand on this whole question, the sort of, I don't know, duty of care when you take real people.
Yeah, I think there is a duty of care. I've done it with, I did a film called Fair Game that was about Valerie Plame.
Yeah. The CIA agent.
CIA agent and her husband. And I met with them, and I was writing about somebody who, was living and breathing. And it felt really odd and awkward to be doing that. It really didn't feel comfortable at all to be writing about someone that was real. And then you start to think about whenever you're taking somebody who is historical, what your duty of care is. I haven't seen Baby Reindeer, but I've read a bit about around it, and it does sound like someone's made someone's cocked up there in terms of just.
What do you mean?
Well, just in terms of saying that it's true or not. It just feels like to say something's a true story that isn't. You just don't have to do that. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, you wonder whether that's the sort of Netflix legal department or whether it's Richard Gadd. I suppose there are so many elements and moving parts in a drama that, in a sense, that the star of it, the author of it, kind of loses some control in the process, in the industry of it.
Yeah, and maybe loses sight of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Because who knows why you write something and what it is that you're trying to evoke or exorcise. I don't know. You'd have to ask him why it went that way.
What is your sense of the pulse at the moment? I'll take you at your word when you say you don't get involved in daily news and politics, but you are sort of right in the middle of the sort of cultural, I guess, fabric of this country now, right? What is your sense of where we are?
I don't love politics, and I don't love the day-to-day of it the way that you guys must absolutely vociferously and passionately do. But I do find it really difficult when people like I went to Cambridge with or who I knew about at the time are stuffing it up to the degree that they are. It does feel like the most almighty cluster. The last, I stop in the street sometimes and just remember Liz Truss. It's just breathtaking what happened there. I have to sit down. It was just so nuts.
And does any bit of you sort of think, do you feel a sense of pathos? Like you are still watching characters publicly dissolve, aren't you?
Yeah, I think I do. I think my subject is dignity.
Yeah.
I think that dignity is the subject of drama way more than life or death is the subject of drama. No one cares who wins a sword fight in a play. But the second someone's dignity is at stake, everybody leans forward. Your dignity is at stake by showing up in the theatre. You said, John, just before we started, that the experience of watching a play was absolutely painful and you felt implicated by it. Well, that's what it's for. So yeah, dignity is the subject of drama, and I think I'm drawn to the Andrew interview, and I'm drawn to watching Liz Truss's behaviour when she's got like less than 2 months in office. So yeah, it's just the thing that throws up most of all is that I live in a dream world, and I'm focused most of the time on stuff that would probably just, I think all the time you're spending doing this, I'm thinking about fire and swords and like.
Is that where we're going next?
I can spend all day just like reading about fire and what fire means in drama and in history, and I can then do that all week.
Where do the ideas germinate then?
I don't know that, but they take forever. I wait. I've got about 5 or 6 plays that if you held a gun to my head, I could probably have a stab at writing. Some of them have been knocking around for 30 years.
Jesus.
So 5 or 6 plays that are in a semi-state of construction.
Yeah,
or written.
Arthur Miller said you've got to wait for the play to pass behind your eyeballs, and then you can write it. And so it's that. It's just you can see them up there. You can see they're there, and you just got to wait.
It's amazing.
Amazing. Fantastic to talk to you, Jez Butterworth. Thank you so much for coming in.
Right, since we promised you a Q&A, which is now going to take place on Friday, and it will happen, thought we couldn't leave you without at least one question. And we have had a really good one from Greg. And Greg says, hi all, considering Liz Truss is appearing on even further to the right platforms that Reform have taken action against their members for being associated with, should Rishi Sunak now be taking the whip from her? Has she got to the place where she's gone past comedic to dangerous? And this is referring to an appearance that she's made on a podcast. Actually, I'm not even going to name because it's so horrendous. And
yes,
outrageous.
and the person who hosts this podcast, this is not just to the right of normal political dialogue. This is misogynistic, sexist, vile.
Yeah.
To the nth degree.
But of course, she has also appeared with Steve Bannon, who of course is a conspiracy theorist and a far-right figure, has made excuses for the attempt to basically have a coup and so on. So there is absolutely no doubt that Truss is doing things that I cannot imagine any Prime Minister, past or present, of any political stripe doing. To just flog a few books of her book, which are sold badly. I'm not sure what depths she will not go to, and I think that Rishi Sunak, if he wanted to have a lasting legacy for his party, he would take the whip from her and deselect her, because in a situation either where either the Conservative Party loses badly, she could end up being a very influential voice, dragging it to all sorts of places that it shouldn't go to, or by some miracle, if he wins with a small majority, he'll have exactly the problem that we've been discussing with Labour, where someone like Truss could end up being a very, very influential, you'll be relying on someone like that, and she has gone through a process of radicalisation. She is a radicalised force.
I was talking to someone who was a big force at Number 10 during the Cameron years about why they kind of liked Liz Truss and why she kind of got promoted over an awful lot of others. And they said, well, it was because she kind of was able to create noise. She would create more noise, get more attention than anyone else. Well, now you're seeing the downside of that. Completely. Now you are seeing what chaos can be wrought and what misjudgments, because it's like there is a judgment gene in Liz Truss that has gone AWOL. And she is just creating, I think, a lot of unpleasant noise for Sunak. I'm sure he's going to do his absolute best to ignore her totally during the campaign and not pick a fight with her. But as you say, post-election, she could be trouble.
She hasn't even got the loyalty to her party, which has given her everything, which frankly over-promoted her massively, that should never have allowed her to be Prime Minister, but did. She hasn't even got the loyalty to shut up during a general election campaign where she's got colleagues with far, far less safe seats than her own who are on the line, and she couldn't do that during the local election campaign. She's an absolute liability, and she's become the post-prime ministerial equivalent of a gob on the stick, and yet Sunak won't even confront it. And I can understand why he won't for party political management reasons. It's a distraction, but at some point, do yourself a solid and do your party a solid and get rid of her.
We'll be back tomorrow with more of your questions and some of our answers. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.